Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvadakacharya Asadhara Sadushi Shriman. His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swaraj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribo Slava Zabrani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Garangi. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tenamane. Namaste Saraswatunde Ve Gauravani Vicharane. Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Siddhara. Om Agana Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Admayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Vrijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakan Vitam Shah Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Apta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Prishubhanu Sutadevi, Pranamami Hari Priye, Vanchakapa Trivyascha, Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha, Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Questions by the Sages, text number 15. Yat pada samshrayas sutta Muniyak prashamayana Sadhya punant ya upasprishta Swardun yapo sevaya Yat pada samshaya sutta Muniyak prashamayana Sadhya punant ya pashrita Swardun yapo nusevaya Unayat prasamajaya Ashayishta Swaradanya Ponusevaya. Ladies. Yadpada Samshaya Sutta Munayak Prashamayana Yat. Whose? Pada, lotus feet. Samshaya, those who have taken shelter of. Sutta, O Sutta Goswami. Munaya, great sages. Prashamayana, absorbed in devotion to the Supreme. Sadhya, at once. Punanti, sanctify. Upasprishta, simply by association. Swaraduni, of the sacred Ganges. Apa, water. Anushevaya, bringing into use. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O Sutta, Those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Purport. Let's repeat the verse. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. One can derive spiritual benefit out of prolonged use of the Ganges waters, but one can be sanctified at once by the mercy of a pure devotee to the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that any person, regardless of birth as Shudra, woman, or merchant, can take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and by doing so can return to Godhead. Take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees whose only business is to are in serving are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupad, which indicates such devotees to be representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Anyone, therefore, who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, by accepting the pure devotee as his spiritual master, can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they are engaged in the most confidential service to the Lord. They can deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as vice lords, according to the revealed scriptures. The sincere disciple of the pure devotee, considers the spiritual master equal to the Lord, but always considers himself to be a humble servant to the servant of the Lord. This is pure devotional service. This is a pure devotional path. Yat pada samshaya sutta muniyak prashamayana sadyo punantya upash prishta swardunya po nisevaya. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Satarna. An explanation of this verse would take probably around 5 hours at least. But I only have a half an hour, so I'll go right to the point. When we read Srimad Bhagavatam or even Bhagavad Gita, we have to read what actually it says there rather than what we'd like it to say there. And the only way we can actually understand what it says there is to see what it says, the same thing, in different places, and then it can confirm to us what it actually says. So here Prabhupada mentions, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees whose only business is serving are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupad, which indicates such devotees to be the representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Such devotees, anyone therefore who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, by accepting the pure devotee as his spiritual master, can at once be purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they're engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls who the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Now, how do we understand this? Generally, we don't understand it. Because it's quite, in one sense, it could be quite subtle. Now, the pure devotees of the Lord in our disciple succession have been characterized by such personalities as Vidura. When Vidura came back from pilgrimage, for 32 years, I believe, then at that time he was honored by Maharaj Yudhisthira with the following words: Bhavan vidas bhagavatas tirtha bhutak swayam vibho tirtha korvanti tirtani swantak stena katabritaha. That saints like yourself, there are verily places of pilgrimage. Because wherever they go, they carry the Lord within the heart. And therefore they turn any place they go into a place of pilgrimage. Now that means that they're transparent medias. Vidura was a transparent media to Krishna. He wasn't a practicing devotee. He was a perfect, pure devotee. Because he carried Krishna within his heart. Not only Krishna, but Krishna's associates and their pastimes were going on in Vidura's heart. Therefore, because he was bringing the spiritual world there, therefore, wherever he went, he turned that place into a place of pilgrimage. And if we examine Prabhupada's explanation, for instance, in the 5th chapter, 5th verse of the Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, then we'll find actually that is the qualification of a pure devotee. And if one is not a pure devotee, then he's a Madhyama Adhikari or a Kanishta Adhikari. And indeed, a Madhyama Adhikari and a Kanishta Adhikari are also pure devotees, but they're considered second class or third class pure devotees. They're not on the same level as the first class pure devotee. Like the difference between a ripe mango and an unripe mango. They're both mangoes, but one is ripe and one is unripe. And therefore one is very sweet to taste, and the other one is not so sweet to taste. But you can't say they're not mangoes. Similarly, so this is a conception that we have to keep within our mind. In other words, in one sense, anyone who's under the internal energy of Krishna, then he must be considered a pure devotee, at least while he's under the internal energy of Krishna. Being a pure devotee is not so difficult. It means we chant Krishna's name like we did just now. We try to understand our humble position. We don't call out to Krishna demanding that he surrenders to us. And we do it with some determination. Some idea doesn't come in my mind while I'm chanting, fulfilling the sadhana. Let me run out and get some ice cream. I'm hungry. So there's some degree of determination. And such persons are under the internal energy of Krishna. Now there's different degrees because there's different degrees of remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Of Krishna. Just like there's a difference if you put an iron in the fire, then it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then eventually it becomes just like fire. Now, if you just put the iron in the fire for 20 seconds and you take it out and you touch it, it's also going to be hot, but it's bearable. But if you keep it there for 3 days, and then you take it out and you try and touch it, then your finger will catch on fire. So there's a difference in potency. So similarly, what Prabhupada is talking about is not the iron in the fire that was kept there for 3 seconds, although it's also getting hotter. He's talking about the iron in the fire that's permanently there, and therefore it's just like fire. Now, what does that mean in terms of our society, practically? because generally the idea is, at least there used to be this idea, which is not very fixed because it wasn't a very good idea. The idea was that as soon as you start giving initiation, then you become a pure devotee. You become as good as God, just by giving initiation. So that everyone should start giving initiation and make our path to get back to Godhead very easy. Just give initiation, you're as good as God then. Of course, that concept, being artificial, didn't last, because some of the devotees who were supposed to be as good as God and who are trying to act as good as God find themselves in great difficulty, as Prabhupada predicts in the Nectar of Instruction. At the end of the fifth verse. In this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami advises the devotee to be intelligent enough to distinguish between the Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. The devotee should also know his own position and should not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher platform. Oh, actually, let me go back. Yeah, that's good enough. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints to the effect that an Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava can be recognized by his ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. One should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of Uttama Adhikari. A neophyte Vaishnava, or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform, can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform and should be understood that they cannot advance very well towards the ultimate goal of life under his insufficient guidance. Therefore, a disciple should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari as a spiritual master. That sounds quite challenging. Does that mean I've accepted a spiritual master and I made a mistake? I've discovered he's not in Goloka Vrindavan. He seems to be still here in Slovenia or wherever we were. So what do I do? How am I supposed to understand what Prabhupada just said? What he wrote? Well, for one thing, the pure, perfect devotee is a transparent media. In other words, we accept, at least theoretically within our society, we're supposed to at least, that Srila Prabhupada was a perfect media, a transparent media to our disciple succession. Otherwise, what are we all doing here reading his books? Because sometimes we don't even read his books. We read other people's books. But we're generally reading his books. Why are we doing Guru Puja to Prabhupada? Why don't we do it to Bhakti Siddhanta? Just take Prabhupada, put him off on the side, and put a question mark in front of him. And put Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, and we worship him. And then after some time, put a question mark in front of him. Now, at least if we want to be part of ISKCON, which is Prabhupada's the founder Acharya, then we have to at least theoretically accept that Prabhupada's a perfect representative. And his words are perfect representatives. Now, even amongst some of our senior leaders, sometimes there's some kind of doubt. Doubt in the sense that, how is it that Prabhupada made so many statements they claim that seem to be either politically incorrect or factually incorrect according to the modern, sources of information. Sometimes it's quite emotional, so I won't mention the emotional things, and sometimes it's just, mundane, plain mundane, rather than just emotional and mundane. It's just a combination of them. Like whether we went to the moon. Prabhupada, when I was a devotee at the time, so I didn't have a television, but I think it was 1969 that they supposedly went and landed a man on the moon. What, 1967? 1967. Oh, well, anyhow, I didn't have a television anyhow then. So, no, it wasn't 1967. It was? Because Prabhupada, okay.
I was born on that time.
Oh, okay.
Because of that,
You remember it. It must have been the end of 1967 then.
maybe.
Yeah, because Prabhupada called for a television to be brought into the room. And there was Govinda Dasi was there, and Purushottam was there, his servant. And Purushottam was cooking in the kitchen or something. And they were watching, and Prabhupada said, while they were watching, he said, it's all fake. The whole thing's fake. And Purushottam, he couldn't believe that Prabhupada said something like that. You know, the most dramatic thing that ever happened to the United States was now Prabhupada was declaring it fake. Anyhow, I figured what the circumstances for Prabhupada, anyhow, he couldn't accept it, and he left the movement after that. Now we could look back on it and we can say, well, yeah, there's so many reasons why it was fake. You know, they planted a flag and it started to wave, or this huge, supposedly this capsule lands on the moon and not one speck of dust is raised, and then the astronaut jumps out of the capsule and all kinds of dust is flying around. In other words, when the astronaut finally arrived on the moon and landed on it, then the moon became so ecstatic that all its dust just flew everywhere. And of course, if you have no faith that this actually was a good explanation for why the flag waved and why the dust came up when the astronaut, then you're a communist, a conspiracy theorist. You should be taken outside and shot, etc. But people with some reasonable, with some brains, they can understand that it was a fake. That's all. It's just a fake landing. So anyone can take anything that Prabhupada said out of context. In other words, Prabhupada, he explained that sometimes the Acharya, he preaches not necessarily everything he says is perfect. It is perfect from one point of view. It's perfect because it's simply to help people become Krishna conscious. And that's the essence of all preaching. We're not preaching to convince people, how many grains of sand there are on the beach. That's not the purpose of preaching. Prabhupada said the Acharya is not omniscient. He doesn't know if you ask him how many grains there are on the beach, it's not a valid question. The real question is about devotional service, how to advance in devotional service. So sometimes Prabhupada would mention things about black people or women or anything. But if you take it out of context, then it's out of context. Prabhupada didn't see women or blacks or anyone as a body. He probably saw the soul. But everyone has their characteristics in general. You can't say that in Africa everyone has the same height. And if you say some Africans are really tall, then you're blaspheming them. How dare you say that? And some of them are short, like pygmies. And you're prejudiced against the pygmies. You're calling them short. Now, there's some realities, but the actual ultimate reality is that even the pygmies or the super tall people in Africa, or women or men or blacks or whites or green or whatever it is, the little people from outer space, they're all spiritual beings. But I remember distributing books in Vidor, Texas, Bhagavad Gitas. It was the place I sold the most Bhagavad Gitas. This was in 1971, I think. Vidor, Texas is where they have the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. You know what the Ku Klux Klan is? Yeah. What's that? Yeah, the white hats. That's the head of them. Other people had black ones. They used to string up, people they didn't like very easily. Now, if I would have went there in dhoti and tilak and shaven head, of course I had a shaven head anyhow, I probably would have been strung up also. But I went there in regular dress and I distributed Bhagavad Gitas, and they were pretty simple people. They all took a Bhagavad Gita if you approached them the right way. Now, was that bad, distributing Bhagavad Gitas to the Ku Klux Klan? They're really so bad that they're not even spiritual souls anymore. They shouldn't participate in the Hare Krishna movement because they're so evil that they have no place in the spiritual world. Of course, Ku Klux Klan people don't go back to the spiritual world. It's the soul that goes back to the spiritual world. Anyhow, they took books, they gave nice donations, and I never went back to find out how many joined. I went there a few times, but I imagine it must have, they participated in the Hare Krishna movement. So similarly, Prabhupada, when he preached, sometimes he preached in such a way that if you take it out of context, it seems that he's supporting views which would be very politically unacceptable nowadays. But that's what he wasn't trying to prove points. He was trying to convince people to chant Hare Krishna. Read it, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't contradict everything they said, and therefore got into a fight with them over different mundane points, and waste his time and waste their time. Instead, he tried to present Krishna consciousness, and he accepted certain things. He didn't dwell very deeply into them. If we want to find out what he really meant, you can look up the same point in various ways and try to assimilate it. And it'll become clearer what Prabhupada was actually referring to. He wasn't prejudiced against black people. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, when he went to see Prabhupada in Vrindavan in 1977, because Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was preaching in the communist countries. So Prabhupada, when he saw him, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was a black devotee, so when he saw him, he embraced him with tears in his eyes and said, "Your life has become perfect." He didn't say, "Oh, you're a black person, too bad." No, Prabhupada didn't say like that. Similarly, Prabhupada dealt with his women disciples in a very loving and affectionate way. How can you be prejudiced against a woman if you're dealing with them in a very affectionate way? Now, because we don't have so much time, so we established Prabhupada as the Acharya. At least that's what our purpose of our movement is. May your fame be spread all over the three worlds. Now, what about Prabhupada's followers who take up the service of giving initiation? We already can surmise that they don't become perfect just by doing that. So does that mean they're automatically not perfect? If they give initiation, they're disqualified from being perfect? No, they could be perfect. They could not be perfect. They could be kanistha-adhikaris, they could be madhyama-adhikaris. But they have to be one of the three. Kanistha-adhikari and a madhyama-adhikari, they also have to repeat the message of Krishna. But the potency will not be on the same level as the purest devotee. What level we're able to perceive, that will depend on our attitude also. That our receptivity, as Prabhupada said, as an analogy, if the man is potent and the woman is fertile, then there'll be conception. It doesn't depend upon just the man being potent or the woman being fertile. It's a combination of both. So how much we get from our interaction with the devotees doesn't depend just upon the devotees' level of spiritual advancement. It also depends upon our receptivity to the devotee. If they're repeating the message and following it, then actually what they're doing, they're transparent media to our acharyas, to Srila Prabhupada, specifically in our movement. Now, if we recognize that, and we see a devotee, and we remember their manifestation of Prabhupada's mercy, then we're not only receiving their association, we're also getting Srila Prabhupada's mercy. And if we look at a devotee and think they're divorced, they're separated from Prabhupada, then we have to examine, is it my attitude or is it a reality? Are they actually separated from Prabhupada, or is my vision separated from Prabhupada when I'm seeing the devotees? Do I think that any devotee within the ISKCON movement can chant Hare Krishna and serve the deities, etc., whatever they're doing, and somehow or another do it, they just fell in out of the sky and started to do it without any connection with Prabhupada or his associates. No, we should see how the mercy is coming from Prabhupada. And if we have the proper attitude towards the devotees, whether it be Kanishta, Madhyam, or Uttama, being that, as it says in the verse, one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name. One should associate with, I think associate is the word used. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotees who have undergone spiritual initiation, diksha, as engaged in worshiping the deities. One should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. In other words, when we offer obeisances, it's not a yoga, it's a yoga exercise, but it's not just a yoga exercise. It's good to get down on the ground sometimes, exercises the limbs a little. But it's actually a spiritual exercise. Who we're offering obeisances to is the super soul in the heart of the devotee. Because the super soul is the one who's directing the wanderings of all living entities, and he's directing the wanderings of the devotees to go back to Godhead. He's the one who's supplying the remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, especially the remembrance and the knowledge coming down through our disciple succession. So we offer obeisances both to the soul and to the super soul. When we see a devotee who's engaged, is initiated, and who's seriously engaged in devotional service. And those who are superior to us, we can see them if we see they're more advanced in undeviated devotional service and their hearts seem to be devoid of the propensity to criticize others. We can see whatever, that may need some explanation too. And we can take them as our Shiksha gurus, if not our Diksha guru. Now, does that mean they automatically become as good as Prabhupada? No, they only became better than we are because they've taken shelter of our acharyas, Prabhupada. How much they've taken shelter we may not know, because as Prabhupada explains in the next verse, only an Uttamadhikari, or even perhaps a Madhyamadhikari, can understand what level of devotional service the devotees are on. But we can see who's more advanced than we are, hopefully. If we judge it by criteria like how enthusiastic they are, how steady they are in their devotional service. If our goal is to become enthusiastic and steady, then we should recognize who's more enthusiastic and steady than I am, and we should take their instructions how to become more enthusiastic and steady in devotional service in order to get Krishna's intelligence. Didami buddhi yogam tam. Krishna says the more steady we become, the more enthusiastic we become, the more Krishna gives us intelligence how to become steady and enthusiastic. Now the question is, because I only have 5 minutes left, and I said it would take around 5 hours to explain this, so to cut to the chase, if we accept the spiritual master, and we thought he was a pure devotee, he was an Uttamadhikari, he was as good as Srila Prabhupada, he was a completely transparent media to the spiritual world, and then we get some idea that maybe he's not completely transparent, he's an aspiring devotee. He's working to become pure. Now, the problem is, if he claims he's a pure devotee when he's not, as it says in the purport there, then he's not going to help us very much. Because devotional service means to realize that we're the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. We're all insignificant compared to Krishna. We have no significance whatsoever. One atom at Krishna's lotus feet, when you put all the hundreds and billions and trillions of atoms at Krishna's lotus feet already, doesn't make you very big. So humility is a basic principle of advancement in devotional service. So if one claims to be a great devotee, a greatly elevated devotee when he's not, then how can he be humble? He's bewildered by the illusory energy. So it's not a contest who's going to become the greatest of them all. is a contest, really, the advancement is how humble we can become. But not only humility, but how much we're advanced in understanding the science of Krishna consciousness, how we can become humble and acquire all the good qualities of the demigods. Therefore, we take our acharyas, we take our devotees as examples, and we take our devotees as, we take their instructions, how to become humble, how to become absorbed in devotional service, and therefore become Krishna conscious. So those who are more advanced than we are, then we take them as our gurus. And that's one of the services of the spiritual master, the initiating guru, is to train his disciples how to recognize who's on what level so we can appropriately serve them. The service of the Diksha Guru is not to claim or try to pretend that he's as good as God. He may be as good as God, he may not be as good as God, but that's not his business, it's to instruct. Matter of fact, the spiritual master claims to be only the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. He never claims that he's a great devotee and as good as Krishna. Now, if we get a spiritual master, for instance, and we think, well, something's wrong, I detect some problem. Well, there may be a problem, there may not be. The problem may be with me, especially my detection of things. But still, just like a woman, a girl, she prays to Lord Shiva. She prays for her parents to give her a good husband. And she prays to Lord Shiva to give her a good husband. But somehow or another, if she doesn't get the perfect husband, she doesn't give her husband up. That's not the Vedic culture. She stays with her husband faithfully. Unless, so similarly, one may try to get the best spiritual guides, but if somehow or another we don't, this best spiritual master, initiating guru, and somehow or another we don't get the best one, the perfect one, if we thought that's what we were getting, well, still we stay with him faithfully. Because that's the... Now, if the spiritual master doesn't bring us to Krishna, or he tells us something which is not Krishna conscious, we don't have to accept it. Like, for instance, the spiritual master is supposed to train us to recognize other devotees, or perhaps on his same level, or even superior to him, and to train us to serve them appropriately. If he doesn't do that, then we don't have to follow his instructions, because that's not what his service is. We don't have to challenge him, but our business is to take shelter of the acharyas, and we still respect the spiritual master, but we can understand that maybe somehow or another we have to get other instructions so we can advance in our devotional service properly. That is, our advancement in devotional service is to learn how to love Krishna and appropriately love everyone else also. There's no room for instructions of how to become envious of others. The only business is to develop love. That doesn't mean we don't criticize others sometimes. Like Prabhupada used to criticize people sometimes, but not out of envy. He criticized, or as Jesus Christ said, Lord Jesus Christ, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. So if you criticize someone in the shower because they're dirty, well, it's a fact they are dirty. But it's useless to criticize them just for the fact that they're dirty if they're in the shower. Now, if they're going around throwing mud on everyone, including themselves, and you say you're dirty, maybe you should take a shower, it's not really criticism, it's simply telling the truth, that's all. We have to be careful, sometimes people will get insulted, but it's the reality, that's all. So this is a little complex situation. This is not so easy to understand, but in summary, Prabhupada, we accept in the movement, and we don't accept Prabhupada as the transparent media, and his words are as good as Krishna's. And we don't accept Krishna as God either. then we're in the wrong place. This is the Hare Krishna movement, that's what it's meant for. That's why it was established. Now, being Prabhupada as good as God, our business has become it's to serve his instructions, whether they come from Prabhupada's books directly or through his representatives. Now it's our business to learn how to serve those instructions, who is ever giving them, appropriately. Therefore, we have a line of authority, for instance. Not anyone who walks into the temple can start giving everyone orders what to do, even if he's chanting on his japa. We have a line of authority. Otherwise, it would just be confusing. And that includes both the managing authority and the spiritual authority. So with the managing authority, Prabhupada seemed to take precedence over that. He expected his managers to be also spiritual, give spiritual instructions. The whole movement was meant to be spiritual. But his spiritual authorities, like the initiating gurus or the shiksha gurus or the sannyasis, whatever, they're supposed to be encouraging us to follow the purpose of the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, namely to become Krishna conscious and distribute it to others. They're supposed to organize around it, and they have to be Krishna conscious enough to know what the purpose of the movement is. And everyone's supposed to cooperate with that purpose. They should know what the purpose is too. Doesn't matter who we are. And any position of authority we're given within the society, any position, is just not that I become a guru, not that I become a sannyasi, not that I become a GBC, not that I become anything. I simply remain the servant of my spiritual master, a Prabhupada ultimately, the acharyas and disciple succession, and I act as an instrument in any designation I have to fulfill their purpose. And if I have a position of authority, then it's expected that those who are in the movement, at least, should follow the authority. And if I'm not a proper media for the Prabhupada, then some questions are legitimately can be raised, and they should be examined, whether or not we're actually following Prabhupada and the acharyas, and some correction may have to be made sometimes. I hope I made myself a little clearer there. Any questions? Yes. Now, if you haven't understood this whole thing, don't worry, because our whole movement hasn't understood it, including me completely. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I want to ask about, you said about how we should see devotees and on which level they are and so on, and about humbleness. And I want to say that, for example, a devotee might be really advanced, but for me, when they start to say, oh, I'm so advanced, I'm in this position or that position, and I've done so many, it's instant deterrent from seeing them as very elevated.
That's right, that's
So
legitimate.
how do I reconcile the fact that they are recognized as having a very high position and being very advanced in our movement, and at the same time I have such a repulsion for this bragging that some people do?
Well, look at Sanatana Goswami when he was studying Srimad Bhagavatam with the Brahmins. The Nawab Hussain Shah walked into his room, into where he was studying with the Brahmins, and immediately Sanatana Goswami offered his respects to the Nawab. Not because he was a cow-killing meat-eater, but because he was the king. And he understood that if he was a king, Krishna was empowering him as the king. He must have had some empowerment to do that service, to do that occupation. Therefore, he offered respects to him.
Yeah, externally, but externally I can do it. But in my mind, I still think that I don't want to be really close to these devotees.
Well, we have to use our discrimination too. Amadi dvama dambi dvama himsa. The process of knowledge begins with humility. So if one projects that he's the doer and therefore he deserves credit for what's going on rather than giving it to the disciple succession, then there's something, there may be something that maybe have to be improved in his understanding of what's going on. You know, how there are 5 factors of which the super soul should be considered too, plus all the acharyas. That whatever we do is by the mercy of the acharyas. We're just instruments. Mitra matram bhavasava sachin. Just become an instrument. So it's legitimate. It can be a little concerned by how it actually advances the devotee in spiritual life, and respect them for their, you know, it's not by accident. They've done sometimes wonderful things to advance Krishna consciousness, but they just don't have a perfect understanding of who actually are the doers. They just claim themselves to be the doers. They forgot about Krishna.
I also want to ask about having such person in positions of authority, like from a managerial point of view.
No.
Even if they are, you know, very capable and good managers and so on, when they start to say that I do so many this and this, and
we
is
fold our
it
hands
good
and offer
to have them in that position, or better not if we?
Well, I don't know. There are so many varieties of circumstances and whatever. It's like saying that we don't have a very good we don't have a perfect cook, so we're not going to cook.
No, but it's better to have a person who maybe does not have so much experience in managerial things, but he has a better, let's say, I don't know, a realization, or at least.
Well, if they I don't know.
Externally projects better realization.
This is very hypothetical.
It's not, but I cannot give names because it would be very rude.
Well, there may be certain circumstances practical, but otherwise it's quite hypothetical. For instance, you had a very humble devotee as a manager, but he doesn't know how to organize very well, and therefore there's no prasadam every day for the devotees. Then you may have a perfect example of humility and be very hungry every day. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Well, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.